The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent, including Olas Media.
Olas Media. Olas Media presents Cannabis Enlightened. Now here's your host, Dr. Leroy Brady.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another interesting, stimulating episode of Cannabis Enlightened. I'm your host, Dr. Leroy, and today I have some very special people with me. They've been with me before. Together, we were together a couple of times. We were together last year in 2021, yes. And then we did our episode in 22 in June. And people are probably wondering, well, why, if you had them on in June, are you bringing them back in October? And it's because there is some very, very astounding, almost miracle-like news that we want to discuss with our audience with respect to, and I'll let a little bit out, with respect to cannabis and cancer that is just absolutely astounding. And I just feel like the audience needs to hear this. And this is part of a particular way we were going to go with this podcast. I was going to have a portion of the podcast called Cannabis for Life, Cannabis Enlightened for Life, the number 4, and then life. And that would be people who have used or are using cannabis in some way, shape, or form for an ailment, illness, something that they contracted or they were born with that has made their life miserable, but through cannabis, they're much, much better. Now, I can't think of anyone better, any situation better to talk about that than you two, because as we will get into it with our audience, and with you, they will see what I'm talking about. But it does have to do with cancer. And this is a repeat appearance and podcast by Nicole and Jaime. And I'm just so delighted to have both of them with me. Nicole is extremely courageous, probably with the exception of my mom, the most courageous woman I know. Okay. And Jaime just exemplifies the loving husband. Okay. I mean, I think he would actually take a bullet for Nicole, break through walls for Nicole. And through this ordeal, I believe he's done that and more. So with that, I want to welcome Nicole and Jaime to the program today. Welcome.
Thank you, Leroy. It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Leroy. That was a great presentation for us. And so we're very grateful to be here with you and share our story, most of all.
Okay, great. Now, like they do on most sequels, okay, we're going to bring the audience up to speed a little bit with what happened the last time you were here. That was, as I said, that was June of 22. So June of 22, can you just kind of sum up what was going on then?
Sure, absolutely. Right. We, when we met, we were actually in the middle of my treatment, and it's a treatment that I have to go through every 3 weeks as part of, the metastatic breast cancer protocol. And I remember speaking to you because, we were waiting to see the results from some of the tests that were coming back because they were marker tests at that time.
We at the time that we made the last interview, Leroy, we were at the hospital, and I don't know if you there was a lot of hustle and bustle behind us because that's part of our life. It's Nicole's disease is a chronic disease. She's exceeding the expectations. She has exceeded the statistics. And, that was the purpose that we set out to accomplish when we received the diagnosis. We didn't want Nicole to be a statistic because we knew that there was so much more to do for her ailment, for her treatments, through the use of alternative therapies such as cannabis and psychedelics.
Right.
And so, it's part of her routine because she has a great group of doctors that are always looking after her diligently. And, we have, because this is unknown territory where we have stepped into the unknown because her doctors are not able to explain why her results are the way that they are. I'm talking about her traditional doctors. Her alternative doctors have good know-how as to why she's responded to her treatments this way. And the success really lies in just the combination of treatments that we've used that have addressed both the physical, the mental, and I like to really emphasize on the spiritual because traditional medicine right now scoffs at the spiritual aspect of healing.
Yeah.
But it is such a relevant point anecdotally, and that's what has propelled this journey forward.
So, and Nicole, can you remind the listening audience what the diagnosis was?
Yes, absolutely. In 2018, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And initially, it was X number of rounds of chemo, X number of rounds of radiation, and possible mastectomy. But what we found, once I was diagnosed, we immediately implemented the cannabis protocol as well. And thankfully, after 5 months and only 3 chemo rounds, there was no evidence of disease. And that kind of piggybacks on what Jaime was explaining, where doctors were just kind of amazed at what had occurred. So much so that even my first oncologist, who I'm not with anymore, didn't even recognize or acknowledge that, cannabis played a role in any of this. So the initial diagnosis was pretty bleak. We really didn't know what we were facing at the time. And to be quite honest, didn't know whether or not I was going to make it this far. But things worked out. And thankfully, here we are now, and finding myself in a really positive position, just really, really thankful and grateful.
So I hate to do this. I'm probably going to go back and remind you of some of the painful times, but it's only because, Nicole and Jaime, because Nicole, you look so good. And I know that some of what is happening right now in terms of what we're doing with the podcast, we're filming some of this. So people will see your face. Okay. And they'll say, no, come on. This is another conspiracy. This woman did not have anybody's cancer. She is probably a movie star.
Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Leroy is putting this on. So can you kind of go back and remind the audience how bad this was for you? Nicole talked about the outcome. There was no real outcome. So, but there was an outcome that you could expect, which wasn't really great. So, Jaime, can you talk about what that outcome was from a medical standpoint?
Absolutely, Leroy. So I want to just put it into context what stage 4 metastatic breast cancer really means. So there is not any cure for stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Science has definitely improved the outcome of patients. There are technologies and there are treatments that are available that can extend somebody's life. Mm-hmm. But a life with this type of diagnosis is constantly trying different methods, different therapies, so that we keep the patient alive as long as possible. And, the statistics are showing us that so far the treatments can only extend a patient's life for about 10 years in the best case scenario. and that's it. And the quality of, and it really becomes a question of quality of life, because you really have to weigh in between, you really have to weigh in what the patient is experiencing, because these treatments are very harsh. They take a very big toll on the person's physiology, and your life is not the same anymore. The life that you get to live after this diagnosis is never the same anymore. There's a lot of pain involved, a lot of discomfort, and you're really taken out of your element, because there isn't a solution for this. So to say that Nicole is beating the expectations is something very big, because during her treatment, when she was initially diagnosed, the doctors painted a very bleak scenario for us. They said, it's going to be, we're going to attack this, but you're going to have to go through an initial round of 5 chemo rounds. You're going to have to do targeted therapies. You're going to have to do radiation. You're going to have to do surgery. And it just, it was not fun. What we were looking at was not something positive. And so
Right.
we knew
So
that
pain, and then death.
Yes.
much a life of suffering and then death, basically.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, of course, we had faith that there was an alternative. We had faith that, that was not what we were going to accept from the doctors. And that was the mindset that we took on since the beginning.
Right.
We were going to be a statistic on this one. And we knew the therapeutic potential of cannabis. We knew the therapeutic potential of psilocybin mushrooms. We had, thank the Lord, we had excellent practitioners around us, people that were really willing to help us, that knew us, some people that for the first time had learned about us. And just learning about our mission compelled them to help us. And so we ran with that. And we didn't know where we were going with that. We didn't know the outcome of any of this, but we trusted and we surrendered to whatever was going to happen, and we tried our best.
So, and just to another clarification, this is a procedure or treatment that you began and are continuing to a certain degree that was particular to Nicole. This is not something that, okay, everybody should do it this way. This is something that worked for her at this time right now.
Yes.
Which is bringing about the next part of what I want to talk about and spend most of the time on, and that's the case study that is proving a lot of this right now. And I think what was interesting to me when I thought about the last time we met, which kind of caught me off guard, you were actually at the hospital or the clinic.
Yeah.
The last time we met. And Nicole, you were drinking some stuff that didn't look like it was that, great. But I think Jaime explained that you were there going through a procedure. You had to drink that so that they could do some further tests.
They're marker tests, basically. So you go every 3 months, and what I was drinking is actually for a CT scan, and kind of lights everything up if there is activity in the body. So I was going in for those tests, and that's normal. That's part of the routine. And again, it's about every 3-4 months, just to make sure they're doing okay inside.
Yeah, I remember that before I could see you, because you were somewhere getting the solution to drink the liquid. I was talking to Jaime, and I saw behind him a Coke machine.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, if he's at his house and he has a Coke machine in his living room instead of a sofa or a china cabinet, okay, I'm not judging. And then there was a lot of noise, and then you explained the fact that you were at the clinic at the hospital.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was real.
Once a month, that's our living room, Leroy.
Yeah, once a month, that's our living room.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everyone that's listening to this now, if you haven't gone back and listened to the June episode with Nicole and Jaime, you need to do that because it really puts in context where we are now and what we're going to talk about. Okay, so something worked. Okay. And also, I guess for clarification to the listening audience, you two have been in cannabis for quite a while. I mean, it's a part of your business. You have done a lot of research with cannabis. And so maybe more than most people, you know the worth and value of it. And you saw that there was a possibility that it would work in this situation, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, without a doubt. We when we first started in the space, we were actually out in California and had a delivery service. And one of the reasons why we actually stepped into the cannabis space at all was because of that. And we started to receive phone calls from people who were sick because we were carrying CBD flower at the time. And we decided to really do research to help with the medicinal and help with the medical. We didn't want to be those people that were like, oh, here, take a candy bar and go on your way and you'll be fine.
Right.
And, once we started working with children who had autism and epilepsy, other individuals who had cancer, we were really seeing positive results. And we went with it because we were really helping people and people were finding relief, and very happy that we had done that because, there are no accidents. Ironically, a couple of years after we started the delivery and we were doing the research, I was diagnosed, and we took all that research and brought it with us to help with my case. And that was a lifesaver. I mean, it saved my life. And
so you right. So you traveled, you packed up and traveled from the West Coast to the East Coast. Yes. For family support, and also because you found physicians that were willing to work with you with respect to the traditional cannabis treatment and also with cannabis.
Yes.
Does that pretty much nail it in terms of rather than the excuse that I always had to do when I was growing up, we moved because rent was due.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yep. Okay.
So just to add to that, Leroy, we've had prior experience guiding patients to figuring out what to do with cannabis. It was a big learning curve because we would learn with patients by trying to figure out how to give them accurate and practical information on how to best use cannabis in a clinical setting.
Right.
We took that information, we took all of that knowledge, and we applied it to Nicole once we figured out that she had been diagnosed with this. And so, talk about synchronicity to figure out, how to solve a problem. And when she was diagnosed, we had an experience in California where we thought, maybe we need to move to the Northeast where there are good qualified cancer clinics. Not to speak badly about the cancer clinics in California, but it was with what Nicole was most familiar with in New York. Mm-hmm. And we went to Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is one of the top cancer clinics in the country. And we went there seeking answers for the best type of standard therapies that we could find, because we knew that for the type of diagnosis that Nicole was facing, we had to throw in the kitchen sink.
Yeah, it was an incredible journey, because one of the greatest things, of course, that happens in all of this is, you're in a situation where, like what Jaime was saying before, your life is changing. Everything begins to change. And as a result of that, you your perspective changes, your outlook about everything changes. And it was a journey of epic proportion. We threw everything at me at once. And what I mean by that is, we started up with the cannabis. And at that time, I was a very, what I call, inexperienced user. I was the kind of person where it was like, you give me a 10 milligram edible and I would be on the couch. And so what's really important is going through that, titrating through all of that, and like figuring out dosage, figuring out how to titrate up. That was an experience, and it was a wonderful experience, and got me where I needed to be. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because one of the most important things that we always talk about is fear, and the fact that for a lot of people, cannabis is something that they would be afraid of. And we like to talk about this openly, because in the beginning it was really scary, and we made it through. And as Jaime was saying, yeah, the sink was thrown at me along with everything else in the kitchen. So, yeah.
So, and I think we've talked about back in June, and I'd like you to comment on it today. The high doses of cannabis and cannabis products that you were taking, that you had to build up to it. I mean, it's not as though, as you mentioned, you were somewhat of a neophyte in the cannabis consumption, so that you had to build up to some pretty high, doses, milligrams of cannabis. Can you speak to that, Jaime?
Absolutely. So just to mention, we were just on another webinar yesterday, explaining the case study with one of our mentors, Dr. Dustin Sulak, who was one of the prescribing physicians for Nicole. He's been a veteran in the cannabis, in the medical cannabis space for more than 20 years. Wow. And he mentioned that this is the only recorded case of a human taking this amount of cannabis therapeutically. So in other words, this is the highest recorded clinical case of a person taking this amount of cannabis that has ever been recorded.
So how big was that? Give us an idea of how much at the high point, how much was she taking?
So, well, one of the highest point was very recently. And nowadays Nicole's takes an average of about 12 grams of concentrated extract on a daily basis.
What I was saying before, so 10 milligrams would lay me out, right? So now we're talking about 1,000 milligrams a day of THC, let's say, on and it took a while to get to that level, but you can. And that's one of the things that we really, really like to talk about, again, Leroy, because of the fear that's involved. People don't want to do that. They don't want the psychoactive effect. I was definitely in that category. And what you find as you come out the other end is that it was well worth it. It was well worth it.
Okay. So from 10 milligrams that would just about lay you out.
Yes.
You went from 10 to 1,000 milligrams. That is some very beefy medicine. Wow.
Yeah, and that was, so 1,000 milligrams was the starting point, Leroy, when we were first trying to titrate the dosage up for Nicole. So now it's progressed to almost 3,000 milligrams of THC and THCA combined.
Wow.
More than 4,000.
3,000.
3,000, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
More than 4,000 milligrams of CBDA and CBD combined.
Wow.
And close to 4,000 milligrams of CBGA, which is a new cannabinoid that we're all learning about nowadays. And so we knew that we had to push the envelope to figure out something meaningful here, something that was going to create an impact. So we didn't really know what to expect with any of this. We didn't know where the dosage was going to end up.
Right.
All we knew was that we had hope that this was going to work out. One of our practitioners, Dr. Dustin Sulak, had suggested psilocybin mushrooms for her treatment. And that was just to mitigate the emotional aspect of what it means to go through this ailment. Facing your death, I can't think of anything more grave than that. And, some people, most people, it's hard to grapple with facing your death. And you need to have some very powerful tools to help you cope with that.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you start to see a turnaround in how Nicole you're feeling, the diagnosis?
So Nicole, we started in August with the treatments, even before she took standard therapies. Mm-hmm. And then she started with her standard therapies. She was working with her oncologist. She went through her first round of chemotherapy and targeted therapies. And by the first infusion that she took, the oncologist was able to see that her breast mass, which is very significant in any type of breast cancer diagnosis, had gone down by 50%. And that was the first indicator that this was working out. It was just a visual, recognition that this was very unusual. Somebody's breast mass, when they're going through their first round of chemo with a stage 4 diagnosis, it doesn't do anything for them, really, because they have a long road of treatment in front of them. But the breast mass had gone down by 50% visually.
Whoa.
And that presents a very, very unique promise, because when you are dealing with metastatic breast cancer, it's already spread throughout all of your body. So when Nicole was diagnosed, she had metastases now in her neck. She had metastases in her liver. She had metastases in her hip. And it was really spread out. We knew that she was going to go through a spinal surgery to replace the vertebrae that had been invaded. Mm-hmm. And so when the initial mass goes down by 50%, think about it like an alien invasion. The initial mass is the mothership, and then the underlings are invading all the other parts of the body. If the mothership goes down by 50%, that's a big indicator that things are working out. So the outcome of her therapies was that 5 months after she was diagnosed, they found no evidence of disease in her body. And that just, blew everybody's mind. They couldn't explain it. Her oncologist at the time was, second in command there at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I won't mention her name, but she's a very prominent oncologist that deals with the research of targeted therapies for triple negative cancer, and that's the bleakest diagnosis that you can get for breast cancer. And she knew that there was no explanation for Nicole's outcome.
Right.
Other than.
Right.
Oh no, they didn't acknowledge it. They didn't acknowledge it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so they didn't acknowledge the high doses of cannabis, even when there was a change.
Yeah.
They did not acknowledge it. She actually dismissed the fact that I was even taking the cannabis. And Jaime, what was it that she ended up saying?
So we gave her a full report on the explanation behind the science that would produce the effect that Nicole was experiencing. And her rationalization of what she was looking at was, well, this happens in the 1%. You're one of the 1%, and you're lucky, and
that's
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah. And never taking into consideration, wow, maybe there's something here. Wow, maybe this is something that could be useful to my other patients. Maybe we have something here. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Do you guys think that was because it was cannabis? It was something that can be grown by anybody, or for sure, good cannabis can't be grown by anybody. But it's something that you can grow in your backyard, or
Yeah.
or was her position because maybe it's a Schedule I drug?
That's also a fantastic question, Leroy. So I think it's just because she had absolutely no idea about cannabis, didn't
Uh,
support it at all. Actually, being open about it and maybe finding out, for again, what the benefits could possibly be. It's a liability. It's because it's Schedule I, and because people don't believe in it, and because oncologists have a protocol that they want you to follow to the T. They don't want to deviate from that. And so as a result, recognizing cannabis, that's not part of the protocol. So they don't want to look at it as a form of therapy, a form of treatment, or even something that could improve quality of life, even for their other patients. They're not going to do that because it goes against their protocol.
And with that, Leroy, I just want to point out that our medical professionals are institutionalized to believe what the status quo accepts. And cannabis and psychedelics are not part of the status quo. They're not. So that's part of our mission, to raise awareness that there's deep science, there's meaningful and true science behind this. And we have an uphill battle because of the stigmas involved, because of what happened with the war on drugs and how that, scrambled people's brains into believing that this is going to fry your brain and that there's no medical value associated with this. But the reality is that there is new science emerging, and this phenomenon is actually being studied in the highest universities in Israel, in certain universities across the United States. It's a very recent area of cannabis science.
Yeah.
The first discoveries or first studies about the potential that cannabis has to get rid of cancer cells was only published back in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we don't know the specific parameters to find of cannabis strains that will have a big impact on specific cancer cell lines. So it almost is like trying to find a needle in the haystack, because we have so much ambiguity around the complexity of this phenomenon. And so that was very unique to us, because we had no idea that the strains that we selected were going to have any impact on Nicole's cancer. We had no idea.
So as we move into the case study, Nicole, when you heard that news, what happened? What was going through you when you heard that the cancer was had stopped and they couldn't find it anymore?
Yeah.
What emotionally, what was going on?
I was beyond ecstatic, and I just saw it as a complete miracle. All of a sudden, your perspective changes. Now you have hope. Now there's a chance. And the most important thing is understanding that element of hope and having that element of belief that things can change, and things can change for the better. And that can change the way in which you're healing, and that changes the way in which you approach the disease that you may have. And so that was critical. It was an absolute turning point, because again, now I was like, okay, wait a minute, there's a window here. I have an opportunity to crawl through. What do we have to do? And let's push the milligram dosage up even higher if we have to, whatever needs to be done. So.
Kind of tests the limits of science that is fact-based.
Right.
Okay. Science, this happened. We believe in this science because we have this evidence. But
Right.
a word that you used a few minutes ago, believe, you got to believe that it works, is not something I think that the medical world or that science especially, belief is something that they associate with, and you mentioned it earlier, Jaime, more from a spiritual, religious standpoint. But you have to start looking at what occurred with Nicole, with the deep understanding that, okay, if it's not something spiritual, what you believe, then it's got to have something to do with the cannabis that she took, the high, milligrams of cannabis, and that this worked.
Yes. So that's as I like to call it, Leroy, the religion of science that we experience.
The religion of science. Okay.
Yeah, because it has to be fact-based. Whatever falls astray from what they can prove is not possible. And science, some of the greatest minds in science that we've seen really dispel that, because you really have to think outside the box to find real solutions for things that are plaguing our society, our beings. And if we're not willing to look outside the box, we're never going to figure out what's outside there.
Right.
So,
and because of this, because of Nicole, you being courageous, and Jaime, you following it very, very carefully every day, what was going on, how much you was taking it, it brought about maybe the central part of the central of our podcast today, our episode, is the case study.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the world of academics, in science, the case study is many times the rule, the law. I mean, if you got a case study, that means you've been able to prove something.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me about this case study.
So that was the validation of all of our experience, Leroy. That was the validation of, well, we won't call it a validation of the therapies, because in the science world, they call this N=1, which is there's only one example of this that has ever been published. Mm-hmm. And we need more evidence to substantiate the claims that we really believe happened, mm-hmm. right? So, it had to be recorded in the literature, which now it is. Nicole's case study is recorded in the literature. And in order for it to get peer reviewed, it had to pass through the review of 20 plus researchers, each an expert in their field, to figure out the different aspects of science that her case contains, anywhere from the organic chemistry behind the therapeutic compounds and the receptors, the molecular biology, the clinical aspect of it. And so for us, really recording this clinically and taking it to some of the highest spheres in science that are publishing on this type of occurrence was very refreshing, because it validated everything that we believed was working with Nicole. And mm-hmm. So what the science tells us is that in the preclinical literature, meaning that this has never been tested in human beings before, we see very promising results of cannabis exerting mechanisms of action to get rid of cancer. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the mechanisms of action that have been studied for psychedelics to get rid of cannabis. And And for the mainstream, that concept is really hard to wrap their heads around because we've known cannabis or psychedelics as something that can fry your brain. How on earth can it be getting rid of cancer?
Yeah.
So
they're not ready to accept that.
No, well, and that is what we've set out to do, to change people's minds, because we've experienced it. This is our testimony, Leroy. You know, God gave us this example.
Yeah, the knowledge is power. I mean, I think you guys exemplify, and the paper is a testimony, and as you said, validates knowledge is power.
Well, and it also, so the knowledge came to us through believing that this could be possible, because there was no reference to tell us, okay, well, you know, if you go down this path, it's going to work out. None of that, you know, we had behind us. So it was a complete leap of faith. And what I did was, once we had the clinical evidence, I knew that this needed to be explained to the world, because this situation is not unique to us, Leroy. It's not unique to us. There are many people that are actively using cannabis to treat their cancers, but they're not telling their physicians because of the stigma.
Right.
And when we were on the webinar yesterday, and we were sharing with the patients that have gone through this and all that stuff, many patients came forward and said, I've experienced this. I had stage 4 colon cancer, and I took heavy doses of cannabis, and it disappeared. I had stage 2 prostate cancer, and this is when and so we want to be a beacon of light for all those people that feel that they can't really talk about this because it's not accepted in the mainstream. We need to talk about this. Absolutely. In order for us to change the status quo, which ultimately is going to change the face of what's going on. Validate this as a medicine. We need to come forward. We need to document these cases clinically. Absolutely. And that's hopefully what we are inspiring with people.
And I hope those folks, and you are certainly free to share with them this podcast and my information. I would like to hear from them. I'd like them to write to Dr. Leroy at cannabisenlightened.com and share with me their experiences, what they went through, because it's part of what you guys have experienced, and you have decided to make it known to the world. I have in front of me, and I carry it with me on a regular basis. You probably can't see it here, but the case study, raising awareness, the implementation of medical cannabis and psychedelics used as an adjunct to standard therapy in the treatment of advanced metastatic breast cancer. I mean, not only does it take 5-6 days to say the title of it, I mean, it's, and most of these titles do. It's like your case study isn't any good unless it takes, you know, you got to breathe several times before you get through with it. I you know, coming from the academic world, as a 30-year business professor, I can attest to the fact that it's got to be this heavy, to this complex, in order for people to say, okay, now I understand. Having read the paper several times, because that's what it takes to understand. Nicole, you went through a lot. And Jaime, you know, you put this together in an expert manner. I am amazed. Every time I pick it up, and, you know, I've sent it out to, 10, 20 people.
Wow,
a lot of folks that have been on my program, a lot of folks that I come across, and they want to doubt the worth or the value of cannabis. And I say, let me send you something. And you got to read it. You got to read it. And don't just say, oh, no, this doesn't work because you see cannabis. Read it. These are real people. And part of them knowing it's real people is this podcast, this episode, so they can have an opportunity to hear both of you and in many cases, they'll be able to see you because of the way we put it on Olus Media for people to consume this information.
Thank you, Leroy. Thank you. And
I
we
appreciate. Go ahead.
I want to mention that we love you for that, Leroy, because
know,
Yeah.
you and
yeah,
us share the same heart, the heart mission, which is the most important, the highest mission that you can share.
yeah. And I've said before many times that the love that I can feel that Nicole and Jaime have is, I think, part of the healing that took place. I mean, the 1,000, the 3,000, the 4,000 milligrams of cannabis. I mean, yeah, that is something. But the love that you guys exemplify is just amazing, and the strength
Thank you, Leroy.
to go through this. How can folks get in touch with you guys if they need to? If they want to say, look, I heard this on Dr. Leroy's show. I don't think it really happens, or it's really happened. Who are you, buddy? So how can they get in touch with you guys?
Absolutely, Leroy. GraceHW.com. That's our website, gracehw.com. Or if people want to reach out to us through our LinkedIn page, GraceHW, our Instagram handle, Grace Health and Wellness, an underscore in between each word there. So Grace _ health _ wellness. We really encourage people to reach out to us, especially if you're in need, because there are alternatives out there. Unfortunately, doctors are not ready to speak about this, even the ones that are turned on about this. And we really want to tell people on how to educate themselves, to empower themselves, to really understand this knowledge so that they can share it not only with their family members, not only benefit from it, but also share it with their physicians. Because as we're seeing the dynamic unfold, change is coming from the bottom up, Leroy.
Right.
So patients are educating their physicians.
Right.
And they're encouraging them not to be afraid to prescribe this to their patients or to even have a conversation with them about it. And it's so unfortunate because, for us, the heart-wrenching aspect of this is that many patients, almost all the patients that are in Nicole's situation, are not as lucky as Nicole.
Right.
They don't have a support system. They don't have, somebody that's willing to build an extraction facility in their home to produce these extracts for their loved one. Simply because those logistics are impossible. How can you ask somebody that's dealing with cancer to build a cannabis extraction lab in their home? That's ludicrous. So we need to raise awareness about this, because this needs to be a medication that's available for everybody.
Yeah.
And
so with that said, Jaime, before I have to let you guys go, what is the status, Nicole, of your cancer right now?
As of right now, I'm happy to say we have no metabolic activity. Things are going very well. Thank God. Thank goodness. And just as I said before, just very grateful, very happy to be here, Lulu.
And you are
just very, very, yes, I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, go ahead, finish your thought there.
No, I was just going to say, just based on what Jaime was explaining, that's why we're here. So anybody who has questions, anybody who's interested in particular products, we want the education. We want to make sure that people have this, because of what Jaime was saying. Not everybody can necessarily do what we did, but we are here now to provide that information. So if somebody is suffering, of course we can help.
And you're going to continue.
Yes.
No, go ahead, Jaime.
Last thoughts, Leroy. I just wanted to mention, so we definitely have to do a follow-up podcast, because we have a lot of more things in the work. We're preparing for preclinical studies. We've partnered up with two major universities, the University of Connecticut and Imperial College of London, which are important institutions in the academic world. to make sure that these medications go through all the hoops for the drug approval process. We want to make these medications available for everybody, and we're going out of our way and we're detailing every single step of the process so that this can go through as an approved medication.
And as you're doing that, you guys are going to tell the people you're working with, wait a minute, before we make this public, we have a guy that we really like who we want to interview all of us, okay, and break this to the world. And I'm talking about the one and only Dr. Leroy.
Amen, Leroy. Amen.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, listen, I appreciate your time, both of you. Nicole, you know, all the prayers continue to go out to you, you know, for your courage, your determination, and Jaime, for your strength, for being there. It's that alone is a miracle. I mean, you know, you have done a stellar job of being right there for Nicole. I mean, generally you think about the woman is there for the man. In this case, the man was there for the woman.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is a whole nother podcast too. But yes, we are going to follow this up with podcast episodes. And if I hear that you've done otherwise, I know how to get to New York. I know how to get to Connecticut. Okay. I will find you guys.
Thank you,
But
Leroy.
thank you. Thank you very much for your time, your energy, the work that you've done. Really appreciate it. If folks, you've already given out information as to how folks can get in touch with you for information about what you've done. Certainly, they can contact you if they want a link to the case study. They can also contact me, Dr. Leroy, at cannabisenlightened.com, and I will send them either the link or I'll be happy to email them a copy of the case study, and also welcome their ideas and their thoughts that I will definitely pass on to you guys. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I don't see you or talk to you before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Leroy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
Cannabis Enlightened is produced in San Diego, California, and presented by March and Ash at marchandash.com. On behalf of Dr. Leroy, I'm Chris Cantori, and thank you for listening.
Olas Media.